Hello, everybody. Welcome to TBR's webinar today, Are IT Services Revenue Growth Pressures Over, and What Helps Vendors Grow in Challenging Times? I'm Justin Surgeon, and I'll be hosting today's session. Insights from today's presentation come from TBR's IT Services Benchmark Report. If you'd like to learn more about this report, please reach out to myself or one of the analysts after the presentation. Now, before we begin and before I introduce our analyst today, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. If you've been on a TBR webinar before, I apologize. You've probably heard this 1,000 times. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the previous presentations we've posted. Second, I will be following up with all of you via email tomorrow afternoon with that recording link as well as with the slides from today's presentation, so please be on the lookout for that tomorrow. And finally, we welcome questions on the material we're presenting today. Please send any questions you have through the Q&A function, and we will address as many as we can at the end of the webinar. Now, I'd like to introduce our analyst presenting today. Patrick Heffernan is Practice Manager and Principal Analyst in TBR's Professional Services practice, where he directs the practice's syndicated portfolio and cultivates and manages projects on topics ranging from management consulting to firms' financial advisory services to emerging technologies. Ramunas Svarcas, Professional Services Principal Analyst, is focused on analysis of professional services companies, their strategies, processes, profitability, and operational dynamics in the ever-changing services industry. Elitsa Bakalova, Professional Services Senior Analyst, provides overall trend and market analysis, strategic assessments, evaluation of corporate performance, revenue, cost, and profitability modeling. Elitsa is lead on TBR's IT Services Vendor Benchmark. McLaughlin is Research Analyst in TBR's Professional Services practice and covers India-centric vendors and multinational vendors across IT service segments, geographies, and industries. Amy is closely involved in the development of TBR's IT Services Vendor Benchmark. And finally, we have Deleon Narcisse, a Research Analyst in TBR's Professional Services practice, where he covers multiple IT services vendors, including multinational and European-based companies, where he provides support and analysis for a number of TBR's benchmark reports that compare the industry's top performers against peers. And with that, let me hand this over to the analyst.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So today we're going to talk about IT Services Benchmark, and this benchmark is sort of the mother of all benchmarks here at TBR. It has the most vendors in it. It covers the broadest range, and honestly, it gives us a real good baseline for further discussion. We're often called by our clients to dive deeper into what's in this IT Services Benchmark, and so we're going to show you a little bit of that story today. So the basic format for what we're going to cover, what's been happening, that's the, oh yeah, go ahead Justin, yep. Sorry, I'm ahead of, there we go, beautiful. The basic format, what's been happening, what are the overall metrics out there that we track in this IT Services Benchmark? What's been happening in terms of the vendor actions and their strategies, their performance, what are they trying to do? And then finally, we're going to cover what will happen, what are the trends that are emerging now that we think are going to last throughout 2015 and into 2016. So as you can see, as we focus first on the metrics, that as a service continues to impact both business models and results, we're also seeing a impact of foreign exchange. Yep, we should be on, yep, this one. Also seeing a foreign exchange impact on IT services as a whole, obviously for some vendors more than others. So as you got a little quick view of ahead of time, I'm going to turn now to Ramunas to give you a snapshot of what's going on across the entire space. Ramunas?
So, I mean, one of our opening questions here has been, you know, are IT services revenue growth pressures over? And, you know, our conclusion is, in fact, no, they're not. Besides the exchange rate issues that some of the firms are experiencing, there's a lot going on in the marketplace. We're seeing many of the firms, especially the customer firms, being very conservative in their IT spend. And, you know, it is basically reflecting itself in the IT services side of the equation as well. We're also seeing that many companies are being much more cautious in terms of what they're spending and how much they're spending. Typical engagements, while certainly there are occasionally a few large ones, are really test cases people experimenting, trying out new solutions, and this is all as a consequence of the cloud market. So, in fact, we don't see the end over yet. This is going to continue into 2016, and it may continue even further than that. And when you look at it in a much more detailed scenario, and we've plotted this actually out from our benchmark, we've actually plotted all the growth lines for the various segments that we examine in more detail. And as you can see, across the board, everything is trending down. The only kind of place where we're seeing some success and managing to stay above the declining position is in the BPO area, where firms are succeeding in that space in terms of applying analytics to BPO processes and really trying to make the back office much more cost-effective and converting those kind of operations into situations where you can actually impact business results and the results for their customers. So the market has really changed from that standpoint, but across the board we're seeing declines. Applications outsourcing also falling off a little bit. People are not rewriting and reporting all their workloads. They're buying some of them on the cloud, and they don't have to port or install or buy new licenses. And they don't have to customize them because they're buying something that's just good enough that does the job. And they don't have to spend capital. It's basically an operating expense. Same token, as we see the same thing happening in the consulting and systems integration side of the equation, with kind of a general contraction and a much more slow-as-you-go approach. Consulting and systems integration has fallen off a little bit as well. Now, there is a high point in the consulting side of the equation. We're still seeing management consulting as a growing segment of the market. But it doesn't manifest itself here as much as as one would say, because you're looking at strategy consulting, and that's another webinar and another offering that we provide to our clients. Right. But I just wanted to highlight that it is not a dead issue, and it does have significance for overall the IT industry and IT services. The area that's gotten hit the hardest, outside of support and maintenance, because infrastructure sales are down, is really in the IT outsourcing side of the equation. Here, people are not deciding, one, to either stay with what they have right now while they're testing new solutions, and when they finally get to the point of implementing new solutions, many times if there is a cloud component, it's basically, okay, we're buying our infrastructure on a cloud, or we're only including part of our infrastructure. So you don't have to build that infrastructure. You basically just have to shift your workloads to that cloud environment. Certainly a much smaller dollar investment from that standpoint from a customer standpoint. And obviously the vendors are also not then encountering those nice large revenue gains and growth from that perspective. Looking at the various lines of business in more detail, I'm going to turn it over to Elitsa.
Thank you, Ramunas. Now on this slide, I want to dive deeper into what happened in 2Q15 compared to the year-ago quarter in terms of the 4 service lines that we cover in the benchmark. And similar to the historic trends that Ramunas described on slide 7, we have deceleration in growth in 2Q15 across the 4 service lines, and 3 out of the 4 service lines are declining in revenue. The only one growing is BPO. And Ramunas provided a very good detail across the service line, so the quarterly 2Q15 drivers are pretty similar. But I want to call out that they are pressures across 4 service lines. They were driven by increased competitive environment, foreign exchange fluctuations, the commoditization of traditional outsourcing, and the adoption of as-a-service model, which has a negative impact specifically on ITO, which had the steepest decline in year-to-year in 2Q15. BPO is the highest, is the only one growing in 2Q15. Vendors benefit because they move this beyond the lift and shift outsourcing model. They integrate analytics in their offerings to drive business outcomes through the use of data. They add industry-specialized solutions. They increase the value proposition. They also provide productized solutions such as platforms that are scalable and rapidly deployable. So overall, across the service lines, there is a trend for vendors to provide holistic solutions that cover the consult, implement, run life cycle. So effectively, to integrate offerings across the 4 service lines. And this model, one example is related to cloud. So especially distinct across the vendors, we see them helping clients through initial consulting, so with cloud adoption, through the implementation, and then moving into the run and management cycle of their hybrid IT environment. Now I want to move on to the geographies on the next slide. We have 3 geographies covered in this report: Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. Deceleration in growth in the EMEA and Asia Pacific, flat growth in the Americas when we take the quarterly snapshot, 2Q15 versus 2Q14. The Americas, we see the vendors in the region capitalize on demand for business outcomes. So the consulting-led capabilities that vendors have developed help them capture transformational deals. While vendors experience demand in cloud solutions in the U.S., cloud negatively affects growth. So to overcome the pressures, vendors bring in consulting and systems integration, big data and analytics, as well as cybersecurity to their cloud customers to expand revenue opportunities. Asia Pacific remains the smallest geography in terms of growth, in terms of size. But we see a shift in vendors' messaging, which will positively affect vendors that are establishing capabilities there. They're moving their messaging from one that's cost reduction value proposition to increasingly offer business outcomes-focused transformation. So in a sense, they do this by addressing the infrastructure modernization needs of local clients, by offering next-generation solutions such as cloud, mobility, Internet of Things. Vendors establish centers of excellence to develop and showcase solutions to clients locally. They also establish local presence to build the client relationship, to understand clients' business, and drive the business outcomes for their clients by knowing the industries that they work in. In terms of vendor positioning on the next slide, we show a graph with the 30 vendors in the benchmark. 16 out of the 30 vendors had a positive growth year-to-year in 2Q15. Growth for some of the vendors was aided by acquisitions, such as for Convergys, Cognizant, and EXL. What's notable on this slide is that vendors that grow and succeed are those that mix solutions that drive business outcomes for clients, so solutions that integrate emerging technology trends such as social, mobile, analytics, cloud, solutions that address security and digital needs. They also provide the design, build, run cycle for clients, and they also have the traditional outsourcing mix. So there's a mix of offerings. And one vendor that I'd like to call out specifically on this graph is Accenture, which was successful. It grew well above the average. It was in the middle of the pack by providing that mix of and span of solutions across the board. Now, I want to focus on the growth leaders on the next slide, and specifically those are 3 India-centric vendors. Cognizant is aided by acquisitions, but when you exclude the TriZetto acquisition effects, it's still growing well above the India-centric peers. Reinvestment of profits in building higher value capabilities around business transformation, strategy services, and SMAC solution implementations positively affect Cognizant's revenue growth. Next is TCS. It continues to grow faster, but its growth rate is decelerating. In 2Q15, TTM growth was 13.1% year-to-year, but was 330 basis points lower than the 16.4% growth in 2Q14. TTS is negatively affected by wind-downs of large-scale multi-year contracts that have not been replaced, as well as by a complex competitive environment. HCL is another vendor that's growing faster due to its bet on R&D outsourcing services combined with growth in BPO and infrastructure management services. This helps the company mitigate currency headwinds and application services slowdown. TCS, similar to HCL, similar to TCS, is also experiencing deceleration in its growth. Revenue grew 11.1% in 2Q15, and it was 330 basis points lower than the 14.4% growth in 2Q14. So similar trend, similar growth decline as TCS. On the next slide, laggards in terms of growth. We have, Justin, if you can switch the slides to slide 12. Thank you. We have IBM and HP that appear as laggards in 2Q15. Both IBM and HP are transforming. They de-emphasize certain market segments to focus on growth in areas they consider that they excel in or they consider profitable. For IBM, the company is co-locating consulting expertise across the IBM solution units, shifting from a siloed organization focused on technology sales to a strategic IT and business transformation services partner. However, divestitures that happened recently, such as the sale of the System X server, generate services revenue. The divestiture of the travel kiosk services and customer care BPO, combined with pricing pressures in commoditized outsourcing and integration services, dragged IBM's revenue. It offset IBM's success in SMAC and security solutions and positioned the company with a negative growth in 2Q15. Regarding HP, as of August 1st, HP was split into two smaller agile companies, HP Inc. and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is investing in higher value emerging technologies and strengthening its front-end consulting capabilities to position for revenue improvement, even as traditional revenue streams are facing headwinds. In my view, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is following a somewhat similar approach to IBM consulting solutions. However, IBM has more developed and diverse area of consulting expertise when compared to HP. So IBM is in a better position to turn around the negative growth trend in terms of consulting. Now, I'll turn it over to Ramunas to open the next topic in the webinar.
So on the previous slide, you certainly saw that, we have quite a broad range of impacts on the various vendors we cover in the IT services benchmark. We believe that this image really depicts the total market, everyone serving the IT services industry. We're recognizing that many firms, even the ones that are in the growth category, are really trying to change and transform. Let's face it, if revenues are not growing, you got to do something to change. And one of the things that we're seeing is that the vendors are really trying to figure out how can they impart and provide low-cost services. And we're talking about a people business. Services are people basically driven. So many of the vendors are doing a number of different things to improve that situation so that they can deliver the value that the clients expect from them. And so really two of the key things are that really they're looking at, expanding low-cost resources where appropriate, developing onshore resources so you develop better customer relations and be closer to your customer. And the one that everybody's talking about is really automation. So with that, we're going to continue on to the next slide and our next analyst.
Thank you, Ramunas. So here we're going to look at ways that vendors are commercializing their artificial intelligence platforms and really look at their overall service delivery strategies. We're seeing several shifts taking place right now. One of the overall trends is that vendors are recognizing a need for a better and more expanded onshore presence. One of the reasons is the complexity of cloud that we've been hearing about, and just it's really highlighting the importance of having local feet on the ground. Clients feel better when they have local people to rely on, especially when things do get really complicated. In particular, vendors are adding consulting staff in account management roles who can troubleshoot, and also to help with client mining for new business as well. Firms who are trying to globalize, they are either buying or recruiting employees from competitors. A couple of examples that do come to mind. One is Capgemini, and they bought iGate for $4 billion, and that really boosted their portfolio, particularly in financial services, manufacturing, and retail, which is a nice vertical component as well. HCL, they're actively hiring onshore. It's helping them to really drive higher value transformational engagements, but it is expensive, and we'll talk about that in a second. HCL did diverge from its strictly organic approach in July. It purchased some assets of Trigstad Technical Services in the U.S., and that really enhanced its engineering and IoT solution offerings. When looking at these investments in relation to the leaders, particularly Accenture, these investments by smaller firms will challenge Accenture's position when trying to compete for customer experience engagements. It will also put pressure on TCS's low-cost advantage and scale. Another trend that we're seeing is fierce pricing competition. Large-scale contracts are coming up for renewal in the next 12 months, and those contracts are traditionally quite scarce. Clients are looking for immediate cost savings, and unlike in the past, these renewals are happening more frequently. The contracts are shorter, and it's not a given for the incumbent vendor to keep that business. So we're seeing that vendors with low-cost delivery centers can if they can prove their value proposition, they are going to position themselves well to compete for those contracts. An example that does come to mind is Capgemini, and we're definitely predicting that they'll be far better positioned from their iGate acquisition. Tactically, to raise their chances at having a shot at these contracts, vendors must raise their prices or reduce their cost of delivery. They can do that in one of two ways. They can either expand their low-cost delivery centers, or they can do it through automation. If we talk first about low cost and some of the ways that vendors are investing in low-cost delivery, we see Xerox. As automation is embedded into BPO, we expect them to develop low-cost services delivery by making international acquisitions. That will help them to gain talent, which will help them to diversify into markets outside of its core U.S. market. In 2015, Xerox did appoint a new head of corporate business and development of mergers and acquisitions, and they're expected to spend roughly $100 to $400 million in acquisitions this year. Another example is in July, Cognizant purchased land in India to establish an R&D center. At Cognizant, who has a more developed headcount in low-cost regions, they're going to continue to balance R&D investments between low-cost and onshore locations to maintain their margins. And that leaves us with automation, specifically how vendors are incorporating artificial intelligence into their automation. While smaller firms are automating and generating rich data in their solutions and embedding it into their platforms that'll position them for kind of delivering business intelligence value, we're seeing that the revenue leaders are taking it a step further. A first example is TCS, and they're starting to embed their Ignio artificial intelligence directly into solutions. So it won't necessarily be a standalone item, but more of a feature. And by automating those solutions, and incorporating the cognitive function, they're increasing their value and offsetting higher cost of investing in onshore talent in the U.S. Companies are also using automation to reduce training time for existing workers. Wipro recently repositioned its automation investment strategy from service desk to application services. They believe that that will result in a 35% headcount reduction within 3 years while they continue to invest in artificial intelligence and digital technology. And I guess the last example would be Accenture. They have an excellent ability to manage costs, deliver to scale, use automation to support their delivery, and they recently partnered with IPsoft to develop cognitive computing-based BPO solutions. I think that's about as much as I can say there. I'm going to introduce Patrick, who will talk to you about talent management and some of the issues that vendors face and the strategies that they're using.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Amy. So when we look at talent, you'll see the examples here. And when you think about talent broadly, it's no surprise that the war for talent continues. Amy mentioned it. She said, well, you didn't say poaching. What did you say? Stealing, I think, was your first word. That's going to continue. The real key here is how well companies manage their talent. So, yes, attracting and sorting out and getting the right fit for a company is important, but managing that talent really makes all the difference. If you look at the middle box on this slide where it talks about reskilling, Atos and Capgemini, they have to reskill a large portion of their consulting talent and their implementation, their CNSI talent, in large part because it's very expensive to fire them. They were expensive to hire anyway. They have a large workforce that's in Europe. It makes a lot more sense to invest the money, invest the euros, in taking folks and training them for what skills they think they're going to need going forward, rather than go through the as much as 18-month process of trying to let someone go. So it reflects that particular reskilling box. It reflects that sometimes you have to make decisions with respect to talent that are more expensive in the short term, but are more important about how you manage talent in the long term. So the other thing I want to point out is, on this slide, is Accenture is mentioned twice in both the attracting and the retaining boxes. And if you recall, Accenture was the firm or the company that Elitsa singled out way back at the beginning of this presentation when she was talking about which companies are performing best. I don't think it's any surprise to us that the companies that are managing their talent well, thinking about how to manage their talent well, and executing on a number of different strategies around attract, reskill, retain, and in Amy's words, steal talent, are the ones that are likely doing the best. So that's it for talent. Let's move along. I think the next section we're going to get to where we're looking further down the road at what the trends are going to be going forward. I think we're on slide 16. So now we're shifting to what are the trends we're seeing now? What are we going to see going into the next year? And there are three that we've picked out here, and within IT services and with IT more broadly, you can jump on a million different trends. IoT, the decline of IT services generally, like Ramunas mentioned. Cloud has already come up a couple of times. We picked out these three trends in particular because they sort of represent the different parts of this IT services benchmark. There's the services transformation around digital and how that's impacting BPO and ITO and AO and consulting. There's also a vertical trend. We're looking at healthcare, and then there's a geographic or a regional trend. Again, to go back to the beginning of this presentation, this is sort of the mother of all benchmarks. It's got the widest range, and we do cover those three different areas in some detail in the benchmark. So that's why we wanted to pull out these three trends in particular. So that will turn first to the digital trend. And Deleon, is that you? Or who's taking digital?
That is me.
That's you. Why don't you two switch these?
Thank you, Patrick. Despite the negative growth trend we're seeing in IT services, I really think the continued customer demand around digital transformation remains a lucrative avenue for vendors to use to mitigate the slowing growth trends we're seeing as the overall on the IT services market. mostly due to the accelerating adoption of as-a-service offerings that was mentioned earlier. Ultimately, this reality, I think, begs the questions of which vendors are succeeding in the digital space, which vendors are lagging, and why. And the vendors we have highlighted on this slide here, I think, are a good example of such. The growth that the India-centric services providers such as HCL and Wipro are seeing is a reflection of their current success in the digital technology space. How are they doing it, though? Well, I think it ultimately comes down to a focus by both vendors to target niche markets such as the design strategy space to foster differentiation. Now, these acquisitions that we have highlighted here on the slide, I believe, demonstrate both Wipro and HCL's commitment to utilizing specialized solutions and talent as a means to foster innovation across their services portfolios. And I also think, additionally, that this helps both companies to counter the scale and brand recognition that larger services firms such as an IBM or an Accenture can utilize to, win engagements with customers. And speaking of IBM, the discussion around its growth challenges it's facing in the digital space, I think, really merit attention because as we're seeing currently, the company is facing difficulty growing as a result of its notable ties that its services portfolio has to the legacy hardware, applications, and IT systems that are currently having revenue eroded by the growing adoption of subscription-based as-a-service offerings. So this is not to say, however, that IBM, I don't think IBM will be successful in being able to transition its portfolio towards more digitally based technology such as cloud. However, the scale and just the sheer size of IBM, I think, really will just take it a bit longer to get there. And as one of my colleagues put it best, I can't take credit for this. It takes a lot more time to turn a battleship rather than a patrol boat. So
I think I'm the one. Do I get credit for saying that?
I think it was you, Patrick.
I was sitting here thinking about exactly that. All right.
Well, with that, I'll turn it over.
Okay.
So what's interesting really here is that you've got, three companies, and they all talk about digital, and virtually everybody in the industry talks about digital. It's certainly an area where you want to expand and grow. Not surprisingly, what we've highlighted here for IBM in terms of the co-innovation centers really is a trend that we're seeing throughout the industry in terms of people creating centers of excellence, innovation labs. There's a infinite number of different names that firms are using to try to create situations where they can work with their customers to come up with innovative solutions, which then they can take and spread across a given industry vertical. The real challenge for many of the firms has been monetizing those solutions. As we shift to the healthcare market, which is the industry that we wanted to also target here, certainly digital plays a role in the healthcare market, but we're seeing that the healthcare market itself, and not at all unlike many of the other markets, really is within healthcare a very fragmented market. You have a number of different types of potential clients, payers, providers, life sciences firms, medical firms, and then on top of that you have the federal government as well as state and local organizations that are all kind of part of the healthcare delivery system. What's interesting is they're all serving the consumer, the patient, us, all of us on the phone here today. And that is really where telehealth solutions and patient centricity becomes very important. That's why I really listed Cisco here on the chart. They're not, in terms of healthcare revenue or healthcare related revenue, big. In fact, they're very small. They're not seeing a lot of growth yet, but they recognize that customer experience, really engaging and enabling that is a trend that's going to be prevalent in the future. Like I said, they're not a major player in the healthcare market today, but down the road they may very well be. when you look at the other two firms here we're highlighting, IBM and Cognizant, again, the fragmentation of the healthcare market necessitates different approaches to the different segments of the market. IBM is the largest healthcare player in our healthcare benchmark that we produce. They've got the most revenues in that space, yet their revenue streams have been contracting. They're suffering some challenges because nobody wants the biggest, best, most expensive. Analytics is what they're basically offering, and a focus here in terms of the payer side of the market and the provider side of the market. Very important. Analytics is something that's going to have to be brought into the healthcare industry, but different types of analytics for different situations. You're looking at diseases, trying to understand what's the driver. That's one set of analytics requiring a different set of solutions, a different set of scientists to help you in terms of analyzing the data and potentially predicting the outcomes. So it's definitely a little segment in the market. You get down to Cognizant. Cognizant certainly is heavily involved in the payer side of the equation. And between IBM and Cognizant, they're actually ranked 1 and 2 in total revenues for the healthcare market. However, when you go past them, for instance, in the life sciences area, Cognizant, McKesson, and HP are actually the largest players in the life sciences space. But who are the growth leaders right now? Infosys and HCL. Basically the life sciences side of the equation, especially the pharma side of the equation, they're really trying to rebuild their infrastructure and take part in everything that's happening in the cloud market. Well, infrastructure transformation and changing your overall infrastructure is an expensive endeavor if you hire IBM or one of the more expensive players. And the Indian-based players have successfully in the past been able to do this. They also provide remote infrastructure management, and that's why they're seeing this happening in the marketplace. So overall, we've got a lot of different players playing in the healthcare space because, one, it's a fragmented market, and many firms are trying to provide a very specialized solution for a specific piece of the market. The ones that we see are going to be the most successful several years down the road are the ones that are really targeting the patient end of the equation and are starting to bring together the various firms that are providing healthcare, either as a payer, a provider, or even a life sciences firm, to the patient. And those patient outcomes are going to become very critical in the future. And the more you can engage the patient, the better fingers you're going to have in helping improve the various firms that are serving the patients, gain more customers, and deliver their business outcomes in terms of growing in revenue as well.
Yeah, excellent, Ramunas. And the only other thing I would add here is that IBM, it's important to note the difference in size. I mean, as much as the firms like HCL and even Infosys are growing rapidly, IBM has absolutely stolen a march on everybody else in the healthcare IT services space. And that size doesn't mean that they're not rapidly innovating and evolving, and I think we'll see them continue to grow substantially going forward. So Deleon, the last thing we're going to look at now is APAC. We're going to take a little geography focus here, a tour around the world, or at least to one part of the world. So go ahead, Deleon.
Right. Thank you, Patrick. I think if you really take a look at the Asia-Pacific region, you'll find that it's one of the most diverse services markets in the world, featuring many what I call sub-markets that together comprise APAC as a whole. The vendors we have up here on the slide, Wipro, Fujitsu, and TCS, I think are great examples of the dynamics within the region, as each is utilizing their strengths to expand market share across these different, what I coined earlier, sub-markets. Wipro, for example, is targeting opportunities around digital in its core India region, as the company utilizes its growing capabilities in emerging technologies such as IoT and automation to secure deal wins. As a result, I think Wipro is trying to establish itself as a premier digital services provider within India through the utilization of these digital technologies. Now, for Fujitsu, on the other hand, the company is primarily invested in its core market of Japan, which is also one of the most mature markets of the Asia-Pacific region. As the Fujitsu faces difficulty expanding across emerging submarkets in APAC, such as Singapore, I think the company is looking to expand more of its capabilities to similar markets to its core Japan region, like Australia, as there are many similarities within the market dynamics themselves for between the two regions. Ultimately, I believe the success in APAC will largely be determined by the company's ability to build out its services with emerging technologies that best align with the company's strengths in infrastructure transformation, such as cloud and IoT. And as for TCS, well, I think the company is investing in co-innovation to promote its centricity for its clients. And I think this helps TCS to attract customers within the emerging Southeast Asia market, sub-market I should say, of APAC. However, while we do use, while I think TCS is using Southeast Asia as a launch pad to penetrate into the lucrative Chinese IT market, that's not to say that I don't believe that TCS is not investing within Southeast Asia itself. As on the slide here, we've outlined that TCS has established a next-gen technology solution center within Singapore. And with that, I think it's best I stop rambling on and turn this over to Patrick.
No, excellent. One thing I want to call out that Deleon said that I think is really important, because I think when we look at APAC, we can get sort of fooled by two things. One, the potential for growth, and two, the diversity within the different markets. And we sort of forget that at the end of the day, you got to stick with strategies at work. And Deleon mentioned, Fujitsu aligning their offerings with their core strengths, with their company strengths. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, is that the firms that are going to succeed in that region are going to be the ones that do what they do well, not companies that try and do something new or out of the ordinary for them. I mean, I think that's true across all regions, probably even more so in what we sometimes call the frontier markets in the sub-regions in APAC that Deleon pointed out. So with that, we will get to just say we covered both the metrics of what's been happening. We've covered the vendors and what's been happening with them, what they're doing in terms of their strategy and their performance, and then we looked ahead to trends across 3 different areas that are impacting this particular area, IT services, right now, and that we think are going to continue into 2016. This just gives you, there's so many words on this page, you can't possibly focus on it, but you'll get the slides. You can look through this at your leisure. What this basically tells you is that we look at a bunch of different issues here at TBR, not just the ones that we've covered today. The quarterly topics that are on there change every quarter, as one would expect. And this is actually 3 out of probably 18 or 19 that we cover across IT services, business intelligence and analytics, healthcare IT services, which Ramunas mentioned, management consulting, which Ramunas mentioned, digital marketing services, which Deleon mentioned, and I'm trying to think, public sector, and there's got to be another one that I can't recall at the moment. But in any case, we cover a wide range of issues here, and this webinar is just sort of skims the surface. So with that, we will go to questions, and the first one that has come in, give me just a minute to read it here, make sure that it's okay and we actually want to use it as a question. Yes, we'll take this one. What is Accenture doing that makes it grow revenue faster than its peers? I think, Ramunas, we'll start with you and maybe have Elitsa weigh in after you give us the first rundown. Ramunas?
Well, I think we touched about it on a couple of the points already. One, the span of solution. I believe Elitsa mentioned that right up front. Certainly, they have solutions across a number of industry verticals. That's critical. Second is, that they're very good at talent management, which means their turnover is not as bad as some of the other firms. So you're dealing with people that you're comfortable with. So certainly, when you're re-engaging with a client, renewing a contract, or finding a new client, you're working with people that know how the business runs, how it may have run in the past, and continues to do so successfully. I think the biggest element that's made Accenture successful is the fact that they're vendor agnostic and that they have their roots in consulting and management consulting. And I already mentioned that earlier as well. The fact that they can provide the continuum. They can talk to you from the management side of the equation, so you can get your CEO on board. They have an industry specialist, so that if you're in a specific industry vertical, they can talk the talk and walk the walk. And then they have certainly all the capabilities from an IT perspective in terms of their partnership models, and are very vested in terms of if they partner with a company, they spend the time and effort to develop the resources within their own organization to understand how a partner's solution can help the client. So as a consequence, it's a full package that they offer, and that's the reason why many firms turn to them first, because they can deliver from end to end, and if they can't, they're going to engage somebody from a partner's perspective to help them along the way.
Excellent. Elitsa, you want to throw a couple of 2 cents in there as well?
Yeah, just in addition to Ramunas' comments, Accenture is very good at converting the bookings into actually executing on the deals and converting bookings into revenue. So that's something that we have seen over the past several quarters positively affect the company's revenue and growth. I think another area is the acquisition strategy. If I'm now correct, there were several acquisitions that the company made over the past few quarters, expanding consulting expertise, so acquiring companies in the UK, in Europe, adding digital design capabilities through acquisitions, so adding on to the portfolio through smaller size tuck-in acquisitions to add depth in key growth areas and support its growth going forward.
Excellent, thank you. We, obviously Accenture is a company we spend a lot of time and effort understanding better. They're one of the more important players in the market. They're also who everybody asks about all the time. So I'm glad that question came up. The next question is about the other company that everybody asks about all the time. And the question is, IBM seems to be contracting and India-centric players are growing, for example, in healthcare. Does this mean clients are just moving to low-cost players in the market? I'm going to guess Ramunas is going to say no, but I'll let him go ahead and take the lead on the answer for that.
Well, yes and no. I mean, certainly in situations where you're basically trying to upgrade or transform your infrastructure and then manage it, the Indian-based players have historically been able to do that very well. And in the healthcare space, they've started from the back end of the operations, providing, outsourcing services to help in one way, shape, or form or another, and basically have expanded those client relationships to, hey, we can help you with your infrastructure, we can grow and move that. IBM's solutions are all-encompassing. Certainly IBM has the capabilities to do that kind of work, but when you're under a lot of cost pressures as a customer, if you feel that the end result is going to be the same, but it's going to cost you much less to use the Indian-based player, you're certainly going to go that route. However, there are certain aspects where IBM does have an advantage. I mean, their software portfolio is expansive. They can leverage that and use that to get into an account where potentially an Indian player cannot, because they just haven't built that relationship or that partnership. They have themselves a number of clients that have been always IBM clients. And we know that it is always harder to displace and move from one vendor to another. So they're retaining some of that business. So it's really a transformation, and IBM really is working towards coming up with very specific solutions, but bringing those solutions to bear in a more or less vendor-agnostic approach and saying, well, first figure out what the solution is and then bring the components in, and they may or may not be IBM, sometimes is a detriment to them, and that's a challenge from their perspective. But yes, there is some erosion of their business to low-cost players, but at the same time, IBM led the charge in the whole cloud market. They were first with the ideas. They recognized that it was a way to go, and they're not going to disappear anytime soon.
Yeah, so let's contrast, because the question raises the Indian-centric players. So let's do a contrast. You just talked at length about IBM. Amy, tell us a little bit why. So, like the question says, India-centric players are growing. So talk about Wipro. Why are they, in particular, why is Wipro growing?
So thanks, Patrick. Wipro actually hasn't been growing quite as quickly, and it's interesting because you'll see that in news articles a lot of times saying that Wipro's not keeping pace with their India-centric peers. I think one of the reasons for that is that they're making adjustments to their go-to-market. Unlike TCS and Cognizant, who are and pretty consistently among the growth leaders in pace and size, Wipro's really shifting their delivery model. They're actually trying to emulate TCS, recruiting executives. They just actually named their new COO earlier this year to realign their entire delivery system. So Wipro's really been in flux as an organization. I do think that longer term we are going to expect that all this groundwork that they've laid to pay off in terms of revenue growth. Deleon was mentioning that they invested in IP, they branched out into other verticals, they present themselves as a consulting-led solutions partner. The trade-off to that is just that spending on IP investments and the movement to the as-a-service cloud models has diluted their pace of revenue growth. But I think that they're ones to watch, and I do think they're going to catch up.
Yeah, and I'm struck by how the similarity between what they're offering around cognitive and what IBM has been offering around cognitive. So they may be the perfect copycat if such a thing exists. So we'll take another question now. Seems that all leaders find actual growth in completing their existing core skills with additional trendy topics, players, resources. I'm not entirely sure. I think the question is a little bit confusing, but I think the point would be that the leading vendors in this space are taking their core strengths or their core strategies, their core offerings, and then layering on top of that things like digital, IoT, what else is super trendy? Cloud, I guess, is super trendy out there. While I'm going to let Ramunas talk at greater length on this, I'll throw my initial 1 cent in there. And my 1 cent would be that it's few and far between vendors that stake something out on their own that aren't following what they're hearing from their clients in terms of demand. So if there's a trendiness in some ways it reflects what they're hearing from clients. Now, it may be that other vendors are telling clients that and they're shopping around for the best solution. But Ramunas, I'll let you tackle that as well.
Well, I think the assessment is right if we're reading the question correctly. You want to stick to your core capabilities and what you're good at. That's where you have existing clients. That's where you feel comfortable from. Indian-based vendors have always been software development and outsourcing leaders. They're sticking to that. They may be morphing it into helping firms convert from a SAP to a Oracle environment or vice versa, or help implement the new versions of that software. And they're going to do it very cheaply because, hey, they've been doing it for quite a while, and yes, maybe they won't be writing as much code, but they're still going to be leveraging that capability. At the same time, we've got other vendors. Case in point, for instance, Unisys. They've just come out, and their stealth security solution has been around for probably a couple of years now. But they basically said, okay, we know this is a great solution. We are good at this. We do a lot of work with the government. We've protected the government. Why don't we create a software as a service version of this product and then roll it out? And let's use our channel partners to help us roll it out. So here's a case where, yes, they relied on their core strength, but they're then morphing it into what is now current in terms of delivery of the product, and or making that therefore available far more and many more clients.
Excellent. We have time for one last question, so we'll take the one that came in on EMEA. And the question is, can you provide details on EMEA performance? How significantly are vendors in the region negatively impacted by currency fluctuations? I want to point out right here from the start, EMEA as an acronym drives me crazy. Middle East and Africa have absolutely nothing to do but a time zone with Europe. So I'm going to actually ask that Elitsa talk about what's happening in Europe and what's going on there with currency fluctuations. Elitsa, you want to tackle that?
Sure, Patrick. So when we look at the 30 vendors in the benchmark, we have a group of vendors that are distributed across geographies. We have multinational vendors that report in US dollars. We have vendors that report in euros. We have vendors that report in British pounds, in Canadian dollar, as well as in India rupee. So to make things comparable and consistent across the 30 vendors, we have chosen to use the US dollar as the basis currency for this benchmark. So effectively, when you convert revenues for companies like that report in euro, Atos, Capgemini, T-Systems, they were negatively impacted by currency fluctuations because of the strength of the US dollar against the euro in the past few months, and currently as well. So we did the analysis, and in dollar terms, as we see on slide 9, we have the revenue for EMEA declining by 4.5% year to year in dollar terms when we compare everyone across the board in this currency. But when you do the calculation in euro, it actually gives a different picture. So the growth in euro terms across the 30 vendors comes up to around 8% year to year in 2Q15. So that's a significant difference that we can describe as the effect of the strong euro against the dollar. And there are drivers that do contribute to that growth in euro figures. Clients are interested in cost takeout through outsourcing. We have comments from vendors, both Capgemini, Atos, IBM, competing for deals that involve outsourcing. Still interest in the region. India-centric companies competing for deals as well. We see vendors compete for social, mobile analytics, cloud solutions, security, IoT implementations in Europe are picking up speed. So they provide growth opportunities for IT service vendors in the region. Vendors are developing industry-specific solutions and also building consulting expertise to address client needs, to build client relationships, to use the consulting-led approach to drive business outcome for clients. So there's definitely things going on in Europe. It depends on the currency that you look at, so we can't judge strictly based on US dollars. We need to take the other view as well.
Excellent, Elitsa. Thank you. We are well out of time now. I appreciate everybody's questions. If we didn't get to what you wanted to know, either through a question or through part of the presentation, please feel free to reach out to us. You'll be getting this deck sent to you by Justin sometime in the next couple of days. We also post these things on YouTube. You can listen to it there in case you missed something and you want to hear it again. Thank you all very much for attending. Justin, anything else I need to say?
No, that's it.
All right. Thanks very much. Take care, everyone.